Well, I think we're live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Mark Bajerski YouTube channel. It's a beautiful day to have a beautiful soul, and we're all ready to speak to yet again another amazing heart and healer and teacher and all the things that this lady does. I want to, first of all, welcome you to this beautiful moment of healing, strengthening, and understanding. Whatever we talk about today, guys, be open, be relaxed, don't judge, just enjoy the moment. So here we go. Welcome, everybody. And today we have the one and only Sarah Tucker. Hey! Hey! It's been ages since.
May I?
We've got a bad connection, Sarah, again.
Loads of other people, but it's just like
connection's not good.
lost connection there. I think we're back again, aren't we?
Now we are. It went all over the place. So hopefully, if it doesn't, we'll keep this connection going. If not, we'll have to start again. But yeah, how are you doing? How's everything?
I'm good. I'm well. I've just produced a children's picture book, which is called The Intelligent Gardener, which is shows how lateral thinking works, how you don't have to follow someone else's narrative. You can choose your own narrative, create your own narrative. But unfortunately, picture books, when people think of picture books, they tend to think of it's just something for children. And even you've got those books where you colour in. You've got the grown-up colouring books. Well, I was studying at Cambridge University, and I was looking into it's children's. It's looking at children's literature really, but they call it CACL, cackle, which I actually quite like, the cacklers. And I have been, as part of the course, I had to produce my own children's book. Would you like to see a copy of it?
Yes, please. Yes,
okay,
please.
Hold just 1 minute. You say that. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, everybody. This lady is amazing. I've known her for years, and she never stops. She's got this energy that never stops. It's incredible.
You can tell I've come fully prepared. Anyway, this
one. Oh, nice. Wow.
And it's basically what happens when it's beautifully illustrated. It's basically what happens when Alice doesn't go down the rabbit hole, and she decides to go AWOL, and she looks oddly like me, Mark. She looks oddly like me, who creates her own garden, sort of like, rather than choosing to follow the narrative. And it's basically, it's like, you can never put me in a box, that sort of thing, you know. So what it's doing, it's encouraging children to stop being told what to do. And, you know,
wow.
first of all, she and even on the back cover where it says, you know, she wants to write her own narrative. So it's essentially, it's she attacks the narrative, and then she attacks the narrator. So
why is that then?
She's a free thinker. I don't know where she gets the ideas from. I really
don't. Come on, we know.
But no, so I've been busy doing that, and then I've just finished researching the biography of a man I've known for 10 years, but I took 6 years researching his biography, his life as a writer, a guy called Edward de Bono, who's based in or lived in Malta, but he traveled extensively, and he wrote much of his work while traveling. And he's the guy that labeled, he didn't invent it, but he certainly labeled the concept of lateral thinking out of the box thinking, because our all the organs within our body work in self-organizing patterning systems, and he believed the brain worked in a self-organizing patterning system, and you'd need something to trigger yourself out of that sort of patterning system.
What kind of patterning system are you talking about? Where we're brought up as a child and we've got this pattern because of
yes, but also on a we breathe in, breathe out, but our lungs work in a patterning system. Our heart does, our kidneys, our liver, our spleen, and he believed the brain works in exactly the same way, and that we're designed basically to be followers, and also
wow.
our
Why?
education.
How did he come up with that? How did he come up? How's that happened? How were we designed to be followers?
I think he said that this is purely looking at the body on a physiological level, how the lungs work, how the kidneys work, how the things like all the organs of the body, and we still know very little about the brain. And so I think he left academia, like he was a Rhodes Scholar, and he studied at Oxford University and Cambridge, and he was professor at both. He was a polymath. He did quite he started off in medicine, and he left academia out of a sense of wanting to, I think he felt it was monastic. Academia is monastic. They could do a lot of good, but they keep themselves cloistered, literally, within the walls, and also they make their research quite difficult to access. It's a bit, if you look at academic writing, it's a bit like trying to drink condensed soup. It's all there and it's very pure, and there's a lot of evidence to back it up, but everything evolves very, very quickly. So it may be right now, but tomorrow it may be different. And so you've got to do it over and over and over again. But, and he was quite impatient. He was intellectually impatient. And so he went out into the world and wrote books. His probably most famous one was The Six Thinking Hats, and one on lateral thinking, which really revolutionized he wanted his ideas to go into schools. He wanted children at the ages of 11, 13 and 14 to have thinking classes, learning how to think rather than what to think.
How dangerous.
How dangerous. Yeah, well, he's sort of exactly dangerous for the system, but he very much agreed with what I think it's Ken Robinson said on his TED talk, that education, as far as creativity is concerned and thinking is concerned, does that. So it makes you go do that, whereas it should do that. So you end up with...
That's the masculine and the feminine, almost.
Interesting. But you end up with a lot more free thinkers. You end up with a lot more entrepreneurs. You end up with a lot more courage. You end up with a lot more courageous thinking. You end up with a lot more curious thinking. Hence, I chose Alice in Wonderland. Because she even refused, as I said, she refuses to go down the rabbit hole because she's heard that story before. So why does she need to go down the same hole? So it obviously he mixed with the good and great. He was friends with the late Prince Philip. He was sort of like he was colleagues with the late Prince Philip. He knew artists like Peter Gabriel and the Eurythmics.
Peter Gabriel is very spiritual. Did you know that?
Yes. But interestingly, so was Edward. Although he didn't. When I interviewed him, he never said his ideas were Zen, but actually, a lot of what he said was. Because he came from a science background, he would always, but increasingly his books, he wrote about 66 books in total. Wow. But they started off as quite academic. Like his first book, The Mechanism of Mind, reads like an academic thesis. As I said, it's like condensed soup. But later on, he was writing books. One book called The Six Value Medals, about not so much changing your values, but identifying the values of others. They may say they have these values, but actually, I think the best example I could possibly give you is, a bank. When they advertise on television, there's one particular bank that uses a black horse all the time, thundering across a field or a meadow or across a beach, and it associates you with all things environmental and freedom and ecological and wholesome and natural, and it's a bank. So it's nothing to do with environmental and wholesome and freedom.
Well, that's brainwashing, Sarah.
It's brainwashing. It's the value is completely money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're not going to sell that. So
No,
basically,
true.
books like that, and then sort of like he joked about. He wrote a book called Why I Should Be King of Australia, because interestingly today it's the coronation of King Charles, and he was interested in the role of a king and of monarchy, how essentially it potentially is the role of wisdom, but then everybody has the role of wisdom. You don't have to be a king. I know I'm not a monarchist, but I'm not anti-royalist either. I'm quite ambivalent about the monarchy, but I did queue for the Queen. And I wrote quite a few articles about queuing for the Queen. I had someone said, "Do you have time?" I said, "Oh, I had 9 hours spare." I said, "If it was over 9 hours, I wouldn't have queued." But everyone queued for the coffin, to see the coffin. And my take on it was that usually, like, I've been a travel journalist for now about 30 years, and I don't, when I go to London, I don't queue, I don't dawdle at all. I just sort of like go to the place I'm going to, and I go to the restaurant, or I go to the meeting, or I go to the interview. But I was able to see a wonderful side of London, the Dickensian part of it, the cobbled streets, the Shakespeare Globe, the London Eye, the Covid Wall, Westminster Palace, the Gardens, HMS Nelson, the Tower of London, Tower Bridge, Hayes Gallery, the Royal Festival Hall. It really is quite amazing, London.
You've been all over the world. How many countries have you been to?
I've been. I think it's probably easier to say the countries I haven't been to. Like pre-COVID, pre all the lockdowns, I was aiming to get to St. Petersburg, and I don't think I'm going to be going to St. Petersburg anytime soon, unfortunately. I was wanting to go to Peru, but Peru has had its own issues.
Massive issues, massive.
Indeed,
terrible.
Indeed, and also Japan. And I was due to go to Japan on 2 separate occasions before this. The first time, it was literally a week before the tsunami happened and the nuclear power station issue.
Wow.
So the press trip was cancelled. And the second time was when the first lockdown happened. So I'm hoping to go, but I do think it's sort of, perhaps someone's trying to tell me something. Do you know what I mean?
Slow down, you mean? You mean slow down? I mean, it's in your blood. I mean, every time I hear you're somewhere else or you've gone somewhere, but you've been a travel journalist for probably all the major UK companies like BBC, ITV, Sky. I imagine you've been with all of them, and all the radio shows that you've been on, so many. I mean, you've had a really interesting life. What do you think about that establishment of BBC?
Well, interestingly, the media in the UK has taken a lot of hard hits. I think the BBC, when you think of the BBC, I think you've got to think of it in 2 different ways. The BBC as an organisation, it is very good journalists, good intentions, actually, I would say good journalism. Then you've got the BBC corporation on the board, and the board is under the thumb of the government. It's really recently came to light with sort of like Director General resigning or just letting go simply because there was some connections with a loan and with one of the ex-prime ministers here. But the Board of Governors is completely under the thumb of the British government. And there was a thing about Gary Lineker recently, as sort of like one of the presenters of one of the most popular programs on the BBC, Match of the Day, and he spoke out about how the immigrants, the people sort of coming from the different countries are coming across the Thames, how they were being treated, and the BBC weren't going to do anything about it, and then pressure was put on by the Board of Governors, by the the politicians, and then it was like all a hoo-ha again. So the media, I had to write about the media within the De Bono book, because he felt that journalists and journalism, but it's mainly directed by the publishers and the editors, so not the journalists themselves, because they don't have the final say. All media, regardless of country or culture, tends to focus on three things: attack, gimmick, and human angle. And its focus is to make money, because they are businesses, and to, if the truth is there or any sense of reality, it's nice, but it's not necessary.
Wow.
So you're focusing on attack, human interest, human angle, and gimmick.
I went on blind date, Sarah, and the reason why it went so well was because I was coaxed into saying the truth and saying further than the truth, and exaggerating the truth, so it became more of a shock energy. And how dare you speak to a woman like this? And it wasn't really anything about the truth. It was about juicy sound bites that would shock the whole of the TV. So my advert every half hour on the TV for 1 week was me completely there on the screen saying she wouldn't know a good time if it slapped her in the face. And they kept repeating this on ITV, and it hit 13 million views that night when I went on. But the true story wasn't what they showed. The true story was something far different, but they took sound bites to make the story. Didn't matter what and who they hurt, it was just the story what was more important rather than the truth. And you can actually see that with everything that journalism or TV is. It's got to be the hype. It's got to be massive, or it's got to be kind of scary. And we know this. A lot of us talk about this, that all we ever see, Sarah, is negative, is fear, is breaking news, is just literally putting people in the lowest frequency. Why is that, Sarah? Why is it always about the worst thing that's ever happened or could happen?
I think it comes back to that. Even the thing that, as I said, Edward de Bono identified, that the media are interested in human angle, attack, and gimmick in many ways. So is the politician now. There's very little to differentiate the two. And also he mistrusted politicians, because he said out of everyone, from their ability to think, knowing how to think, they were very bad thinkers, very poor thinkers. Now, this is, although he left academia, he still thought in quite an academic way. And so in some ways he took the emotion out of it, and actually it's much more powerful when you take the emotion out of it, because I sometimes think if everyone stands at the top of the mountain and screams, you don't hear anybody, you just hear the screaming, why they choose to do that, because it sells. If you look at I had to do something on AI a couple of weeks ago, and I asked the computer, what was the headlines this day?
ChatGPT.
Yeah, I asked what the headline was. Very sort of like straightforward, so nothing sort of like complicated. What the headline was of the Times newspaper, and also interestingly the Daily Mail, this time for the past 20 years. And every single headline was to do with conflict, and most of them were to do with war. It was war. War is conflict, clash, controversy. So war between countries, war between cultures, war between couples. Even COVID, you'd say war between humans and nature, but it was all to do. And they are interested, as I said, attack, human angle. So, for example, with what they did to you on Blind Date and television, especially when they use this whole concept of reality TV, which is, it's not reality. They want extremes. They want to push you further. They don't want a romance. They want Twilight. They don't want competition. They want the Hunger Games. So they're wanting it pushing further, because to see someone cry or to see someone angry is, people are sort of like immediately hooked in, because they can identify with that emotion, whether it's real or not. They're not interested. And also that whole concept of what is truth is not what is reality, and what is reality is not truth. And then everyone has their own truth. And then the problem is that, and again, this is what I've recently written about, and what Edward said, is that the unfortunate thing is language. We think of language as a tool for communication, but he said actually it's a very poor tool for communication, meaning and understanding, and actually it narrows our thinking. And one of the reasons I want to get to Japan is because he was saying that some languages, though, because they almost transcend into a written art form, like if you think about the way that Japanese or sort of like some of those languages are written, it's like an art form. Mm-hmm. So spacing and shape and poetry uses words in a different way, so the resonance and sound and vibration changes. So you realize paintings, for example, and images don't express 1,000 words, which is like a throwaway thing that people often say. Yep. It expresses words that have yet to be invented. It expresses words that have yet to be invented, and our language limits how we think, limits how we feel, limits how we emote. It narrows it. And this is why, if we can work on identify vibrations, and it's sort of it literally blows your mind. I know that's a phrase we use, but it literally does blow your mind. The words we use, the vibration, even, when I wrote about it, I said something like luxury. If I say luxury, some person may think of the word luxury as being sort of like having a Wi-Fi in the middle of the countryside. Another person may think of luxury as being a 6-star hotel in Dubai. People may think, change that word luxury to love. And then you see the difference between how it's not a very effective communication tool, not even an effective window to identifying somebody's values. So
it's amazing how you open my mind to the fact that I've spent 2 decades doing healing sessions, and from the day one to midway of giving healings, I ended up realizing that words were useless, and actually the silence is really where you communicate.
Well, as a writer, and he was a writer as well, but as a writer, writers are always trying to transcend the limitation of words. That sounds a bit heavy, but it's not. Often sort of like, this is where artists, they combine words and images. Sometimes when you're going on courses, like I do a creative writing course, and I'm doing a course titled The Adventurer and the Clown. And basically that's about triggering creativity and healing and mental health, but I don't call it healing. Sometimes some people are very open to healing and the idea of healing. Others are very skeptical about it. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to get inside my head? I don't want you inside my head, that sort of thing. But if you call it sort of creativity or creative writing, it's a way to access it, and then they can go on different paths and they can go and see different people.
I think that's just to help people, for it to sit comfortable in them. So I used to say energy. I used to say it makes you feel stronger, makes you feel more energetic. Yeah. And then it's easier to well, not sell it, but to show them the way where energy does flow.
I think so, but sort of like the adventure and the clown. The adventure is to do with, well, how travel, for example, even from a writing perspective, if I need to think of idea or I need some clarity, I will often walk in nature. The Japanese do sort of like forest bathing. Everyone does tree hugging or talking to trees now, or sort of and traveling per se, meeting new cultures, learning new languages teaches you how your own language is bastardized over the years, over the decades. It expands the mind, makes you have different perspectives, think about things in a different way. But the clown, humor, when you laugh, it triggers, it makes you see things from a different perspective straight away. And getting back to your original question about what I think about the BBC, like there's a program that goes out on Friday nights at the moment called Have I Got News for You? And it's a program that really looks at the news, but from a humorous point of view. But you see the truth behind the news. You see more truth in that program than you do in the news at 10, for example, or the news that's just gone before it. So it just shows how certain things trigger multiple perspectives and appreciation of reality, truth, your truth, that whole, and how even the word truth and reality, they're too thin, they're too narrow, and for give an example, for example, in Japanese, they have so many words for snow, same in they have, I think Edward identified that the Inuit culture in Canada, they have lots of different words for friend. Like there's a friend you would go fishing with, but not introduce your daughter to. You know what I mean? I quite like that one. Not that friend, but I actually like them. It's sort of like a friend. I will go fishing with you, but I won't introduce you to my daughter.
Exactly.
Exactly what sort of friend that is.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really interesting. But I only said this morning, it's funny how things work. And I made a video this morning live, and I said that the dictionary is actually there to keep us entrapped in this narrative, and that when you expand from words, it's limitless. So really, it holds us in a prison.
Very much so. That, in fact, we're obviously meant to talk now, because I think we were meant to talk about a couple of weeks ago. We were meant to talk now because all the research that I've been doing, I'm interested in semantics, because when they say, something doesn't matter, it's only semantics, but it does. It's the sound, it's the vibration. Yeah. And dictionary is very didactic. This is what this word means. This is the definition. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that. Just like 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4,
Exactly.
and so it's and as a writer, this is why writers know this, because we writers are supposed to love words, but all we're doing is we're pushing them with
boundaries.
We're pushing, stretching, and
Yeah. It's amazing how you come at it. It's interesting because your work, you've written, how many books now have you written?
Oh, I've written about 17.
Yeah, I remember Playground Mafia. And I consider you a word queen. You're great with words, and so that's beautiful. And then you went on this journey of going into yoga, which was really interesting to me from that perspective of creative writing to creative stretching almost, and this new way of life. How did you find that when you got into yoga and then decided to become a teacher, and now you teach children in school? And how the hell did you get into schools teaching yoga? Only Sarah Tucker can do that.
Well, I don't think so. I have been teaching now for well over 10 years, only 10 years. But what happened is that just like many people, I went to a yoga class possibly in my teenage years, early 20s. And the first teacher I went to, she was female. And I felt very uncomfortable. I felt that I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't do a handstand, that I wasn't any good at yoga, and yoga didn't like me, and I didn't like yoga. And then in my 30s, I went to a yoga class, and there was a guy teaching, and he was funny. He was compassionate, he was connected, he was spiritual, he was practical. And I thought, this is for me. So it may have been the right teacher, may have been the right age for me.
Right time,
and right time. And what happened is that I really connected with what it was about, how it focused my mind, it calmed me down. it grounded me, because I am, as I said, I do lots of things. I'm quite a polymath as well. And although yoga seems completely disconnected from what I do as a journalist, and as I've worked for Classic FM and Jazz FM and lots of different radio stations, as well as the BBC. But I found that it helped my work, my writing, and because of the way I am, I pushed it further. I pushed the boundaries. As I said, I decided to write about yoga. Then I wrote books about yoga. I wrote books, the amazing book of Brilliant Balances, Terrific Twists, Excellent Energies, Super Stretching, Excellent Energies for children. Wrote poems for them, affirmations, visualizations for them, told them what Trikonasana does for you, how a downward dog is really good for stress and anger management. If you're frustrated, do a camel pose. If you are short of energy, do a halasana. And then I wrote a book for teenagers called 14, which was obviously for those teenagers who were like, they're physically growing, so they're all growing at different rates. They're either very, very tired or very questioning, lots of energy or no energy. And actually now what I do is I specialize in teaching 13 to 14-year-olds who are in the UK notoriously, as far as the teachers are concerned, they call them challenging because they, but I really like them because they really are questioning. It's almost that time where the education system's starting to go really like that, and they're wanting to punch out of it. And I'm sort of saying, don't worry about competition. Don't worry about competition, comparing, contrasting. Don't do anything. This is in fact, the schools I teach in are very, very progressive. And I'm saying this is all about observation. And it's all really about understanding your body, listening to your body, listening to yourself, not to your ego. Your thoughts feed your ego. Your breath feeds yourself. When you bring yourself back to your breath brings you back to yourself, which knows only courage and compassion, from your ego, which knows only doubt and fear, false evidence appearing real. And do you know, they get it. They get it. And if I teach groups of 30, if only one or two get it and more do, and I find them, what happens, they're sitting down and then they're nodding, and they're nodding, and so they go away and
how does that make you feel?
It's the most, apart from having my son, who's now 24 and going to drama school this year. Tom, you remember Tom? Yeah, you said he'd end up in America. We will see. But,
beautiful. I don't know what I said, but beautiful, Tom.
You did that. But he, it's, apart from having Tom, it's the most worthwhile thing I do. It's without doubt. Tom's the most worthwhile thing I've ever done, have Tom. And then teaching these teenagers, because some of them come in and they have so much attitude, and also, like, I'm 58, and they sort of they look at me, and obviously I'm quite flexible, and they come up with comments like, you alien miss, you're not, it's illegal you being able to do the splits like that, can you do that? I can't do that. So they don't really talk like that, by the way, but they are hilarious. They're very very funny, and very kind, very aware, very awake. I think they probably have a lot more emotional intelligence than their parents, and they are. It's interesting. I've taught since children from kindergarten level, and children, you get children about like 3 and 4, and they can get their feet behind their heads, they can touch their toes, and they can't wait to get their socks off and stick their big toes in their mouths. Sort of like, you teach if you get them at 14. So many of them can't touch their toes, or they can't even sit cross-legged. They've become, I tell them, you become rigid in your thinking, you become rigid in your body. And also the way we sit down, we're not meant to sit down, we're meant to stand up, or meant to be on 4s, But but they get all of it. They get all of it. And the ones, they understand the concept of self-sabotage, especially those who do sport. They really understand that.
Wow.
They understand the concept of focusing on yourself. They understand the concept of stretching, that they know that they don't stretch enough. They know they instinctively they know. So it's sort of like they really get into the stretching.
Can I ask you something, Sarah? Did with the AI technology and the black screen, do you think more and more children are actually okay with it, or do you see a kind of let's say a difficulty in communicating with, let's say, people in general, or are you not seeing that?
I think it's affecting people in different ways. I think there's the dark side. I think, unfortunately, things like pornography will have an impact on the way certain age groups think of relationships. Definitely.
Wow, yeah,
But I think that from a younger age group, there'll always be that level who are quite sophisticated, who will treat what they to not believe what they see. But then the problem is that you can't distinguish what is true from untrue.
exactly.
So you've really got to go into your gut.
Yeah,
you've got to trust your intuition, and you've got to trust the vibration of how you feel about it.
how do you trust when a child sat listening to a man dressed in women's clothes talking about that there is no such thing as a boy or a girl anymore? How does that come across to the children? Is that a good thing? Do you think that's a positive thing?
I think they're bombarded with a lot of stuff. I think there's always that phrase that I encounter amongst parents, and also amongst because when I wrote The Playground Mafia, I focused on sort of like the parenting angle, and now I'm sort of more involved
You
with
got
the
some
teaching
grief
angle.
off that, though. You got some grief from parents off that. I mean, I remember at the time there were some people saying some stuff. I thought it was great, but it brings home people's weaknesses, and it affected them. And of course they're going to fight back at you. They're going to kick back at you because you write the truth. You write what you see, and they don't like that. They don't want to hear that.
I think it's that they don't want to. They would prefer you write lies about them than the truth about them. I think when you really get to people, it's when you see them. So they either, depending what it is, whether it's good or bad, if you are seen, it's sort of like, it's like it can be a relief. Oh, someone's seen me. I'm here. I have a voice. I'm no sort of, or it can be, oh God, I don't want you to see me. But that's nothing to do with them. That's to do with you. That's to do with them. That's not to do with so basically if they get angry, it's not to do with me, it's to do with them. It's all to do with them, and that makes them even more angry because all I'm going to say is to do with you, not to do with me. So that makes me more angry because I'm even more right. But I don't say I'm right, you're wrong. I just say, no, this is a mirror. Sort of like, this is a mirror. I keep saying this is a mirror. So you can see myself. So all they do, so they get increasingly angry, so they can see their increasing anger. And
don't you find though, Sarah, that these people actually truly know what they're like, but they've been exposed, and because of that, it's almost like you have offended me by what you've said. And people now are so offended. And it's almost like children no understanding at school of being offended and understanding why you're offended, understanding why you're triggered. And I think, we need our children to have some kind of foundation of understanding life and understanding why we're triggered and what it is within ourselves. Because I just see all around me now, children are so confused. You quite rightly say that children are smart, they're intelligent, some get it. I mean, I used to have kids here, 13, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds here. And out of a group of maybe 8, 1 or 2 might get it. And then it changes their complete life. The others, they're not ready for it, or it's just not their moment. But it's interesting that with kids, they don't have any tools to deal with emotions.
Well, I think that there's something in the UK called PSHE, which is really teaching emotional intelligence, and part of what I do with yoga, it's that's connected to it in some of the schools. As I said,
is that how you got in? Is that how you got in?
I got in because I wanted to. I'll speak about this first, and then I'll talk about how children want honesty. They want honesty and fairness. They're very hot on honesty, very hot on fairness. And then they see politicians who are neither fair nor honest. But anyway, that's another story. How I got into yoga was I was contacted by a school's liaison officer. And he said he got my details online, and would I like to teach a group of police cadets? And I said, yes, okay, how old are the police cadets? And he said, oh, about sort of like 17, 18. I said, yes, I'll do that. And he said, well, there's no money. And I'm okay, that's fine. I said, don't worry about it. I said, you know. So I said, well, I'll go along, right? So I was due to go along at something like 7:30. And I got a call and I said, well, could you come along at 5:30? And I was thinking, okay, right. So I was sort of like, obviously 2 hours earlier. So I went along and I was presented with a whole group of 10-year-olds. And I went, okay, right. So slightly different demographic. He said, oh, you've got the older group later on, but I thought you'd be good at this. So I thought, okay. Wow. So I started to teach them, but obviously it was quite didactic. I often think if you can you should be able to teach yoga on radio or teach blind people yoga, you know, sort of like, so telling them when to breathe in and out and explain how the body positioning goes. And it's about vibration anyway, and sort of how you're feeling, being connected into the body rather than the thoughts. And I taught them and they loved it. And a lot of it is to do with breathing out, strengthening the breathing out. A lot of people think, oh, it's to do with the breath, but really everyone's very good at holding their breath. Everyone can hold their breath for a long time, just like they can hold in their emotions. It's letting, you know, lion's breath, all the different types of breath.
The lion's breath is the greatest, funniest thing I've ever seen. I put a meme up the other day of an American woman doing it. It's great.
Absolutely brilliant. In the car, so good. If you've got road rage, do lion's breath, or bellows breath.
You know, a double. You know, if you get a double chin, my sister used to do this back in the 70s. XYZ, XYZ.
Yeah, and that one as well. But anyway, but it's really good. Facial yoga and laughing yoga, all that sort of all exercise.
Or even laughing. Even laughing is good. You want to try it sometime.
Well, they call it the laughing yoga, but it's really good and sort of, you know. But anyway, so I taught these two groups, and obviously in a very, very different way. Yeah. And he said, "Can I recommend you to some schools?" So he contacted some schools in the area, and I ended up teaching one particular school, every single age group from kindergarten right the way through to 11-year-olds every week. And then they said, you know, we had children coming up saying, school is the best thing ever. I am so lucky. I'm so lucky to be here. And they said, we'd like you to be as like a staff member. And then I got contacted by some secondary schools, and again, as I said, with teenagers, completely different way of teaching. You know, I think I could teach them an hour of sun salutations and they'd be really, really happy. But talking and sun salutations and balancing, they are so and to challenging themselves. You know, the more challenging the poses, the more they like it, but they are really ready to engage with emotional intelligence at 13, 14, and I think this is why they are so conflicted at that age within an education system which says you've got to do history, you've got to do geography, you've got to do French, you've got to do English, you've got to do math, because they're not thinking math and English and French, they're sort of thinking, and they're thinking that, and the system is going that. So and it's literally which is gonna, you know, and that's when it gets really that's when it gets interesting.
I tell you something, when I was at school, I rebelled against everything, but there was one brief moment where we had a choice. First ever, it was like handing a prisoner who's been in the prison for 50 years a knife to open a box or something, and he goes, "Give me a knife." Like Charlie Bronson, like, he gave me a knife. He trusted me. Like that moment where the teacher said, "It's your choice. What do you want to do?" And it was like, I can't explain the freedom that was in that, just that moment of being given choice. And I think the schooling system is a prison that gives you no choice. And I think that in itself is an emotional trauma, if not an abusive trauma to children?
I think again, it's the words. It's I feel that the education. I think it's the education system. I think the education system has to change. I think the schools that I teach in, which allow yoga and allow visualization and allow meditation, it's very obvious the way I teach is in complete contradiction to everything else that they're taught.
How'd you get away with it though?
Because the person I work to is literally called the director of well-being. Like when it's almost like a Harry Potter school.
Yeah.
And if you look in Alice in Wonderland, how when she's going down the rabbit hole, she's thinking about the classes that she's missing, you know, and also rather than doing geography, she makes up all these unusual lessons that she goes to, but actually they make much more sense than sort of like these very structured, you know, class and subjects that we're taught, which don't really relate to anything that we may use or need in later life. Whereas yoga, you will need visualization, you will need meditation, you will need connection to your breath, you will need, and I think that's what I say. I said you'll be doing this for, you know, so many weeks. They usually, I get everybody for a couple of hours every week for 6 weeks. And I said, it doesn't stop here. I said, yoga is nothing to do with how flexible you are, how strong you are, how much stamina you have. I said, you will get more stamina, you will get more strength, you will become more flexible, but they are all byproducts. They're all byproducts of the whole philosophy of what you'll be learning, which is your connection to your breath and genuinely empowering yourself. And I said, everything around you, everything in society will tell you you need something more than yourself, that you are not enough. Everything and everyone in a different way, using different words, consciously or unconsciously, will tell you that you need something or that you want something that you don't want. I said, the stronger you have connection to yourself and your breath, the more you'll realize, don't need any of it. None of it's important. None of it. And can you imagine sort of, I'm saying all this and then they go into another lesson and I'm saying, now you ought to get 78% in order to get into an A grade, and if you get over 64% you get into a B grade. So I'm saying all of that's rubbish. Forget it.
Exactly. How do you get away? I mean, most people get fired or say, I'm sorry, we don't need you anymore. So I give you a perfect example. There was a healer that ended up at the school here, and my daughter came back and said, Dad, I did what you did today. And I said, what did you do? She said, I put my hands over the boy next to me and gave him energy. And I'm like nearly crying. And I'm saying, who's taught you that? We've got a new teacher who's very much into this. And she was only 8 years old. She was fired. 2 months later, she was gone. She was out of there. And the bullying stopped. Her bully stopped when that happened. And apparently all the kids got on in the playground soon as that healing session with each other took place.
Yeah, I think it's, again, that's fear. What people don't understand, this is adults, what adults don't understand, they fear an attack. And you come back to the same media thing, attack, gimmick, human angle. It's sort of, people are happier with attack. It's sort of like, if they're afraid, they'll attack. Animals attack, they attack what they don't understand. And I think
the other thing is as well, Jordan Maxwell, you probably don't know who he is, but Jordan used to speak about words and maritime law and all. It's a fascinating subject. But he said, you get the government you deserve. And, you know, that's basically it. So basically what the people want is what the people get. So you deserve what you get, and you get what you deserve. So
well, basically, we make the choices. Everyone thinks everyone, but we ultimately make the choices.
Yeah, I mean, if everybody stopped, do you think the world? Because I've realized that, you know, I want love in this world. I want people to be kind to each other. I want people to have, you know, everything that we have, everything that I have. I don't want to see anybody on the streets sick and all that. That doesn't serve everybody's purpose. So if we now change the government and said it's all about love, there's going to be a lot of people out there saying, hey, hang on a minute. I don't want this. This isn't what I signed up for. You know what I'm saying? It's not. So I don't think we'll ever be able to change the world, the government, and the system, because the system is set there deliberately, and they're churning out kids in that certain way. I mean, God forbid they get to university and they've got a mindset that is almost uncrackable. You know, maybe an odd few are, but I see the system that churns out the system wheel that keeps going. So that's why I don't think education has ever changed in 100 years, because it's perfect if you want that system and you want the machine to keep carrying on. Do you not agree?
I think there have been some people who have attempted to change it over the years, like Froebel and his concept of kindergarten. You've got the Steiner, I think it's the Steiner schools.
Steiners,
You've got the forest schools who are very much focused on the outdoors. As I said, De Bono wanted to teach children how to think rather than what to think, which is very dangerous, because if you teach, basically, as soon as you start teaching children how to think, and also you teach values as well at the beginning, sort of entrench that from a very, very young age, away far from religion or any of the structured things like that, which are fear-based. You create people who are able to see the emperors with no clothes. You train people to see the Matrix. You train whatever analogy you want to put. You are able to see. You are able to bring up people who see with better eyes, basically, and that ultimately changes the system. Because if you've got all these powerful people saying, "Look at me, and we're going to do this," and you've got people who are saying, "No, I don't believe in you. I don't see you. I don't value. I don't trust you. I'm not going to vote for you. I'm not going to pay for your product. I don't need your product." Then they become powerless, because you haven't. So although you say sort of like the structures are still in place, ultimately there's more of us than there is of them.
Yeah, but look at the BBC, look at ITV, look at Hollywood, look at Netflix. It's all about fly on the wall documentaries. Look at the Kardashians. Look at what they've got. Look at how you should be and what you should be. This is a massive program, Sarah, that continuously churns out children that their values are completely the opposite of what we think. And to me, it's a never-ending challenge to try and help people see beyond that program, which is brutal, in my opinion. I mean, how many people on the BBC actually speak the truth on when they're live, on Talking Live? It's normally connected, in my opinion, to either selling something or a propaganda that speak what they want you to speak, but they never bring on people that I know who have a different understanding, which I believe is far more truthful than what theirs are. So how do we ever break that? How do we ever break that spell, that program?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned about we were talking about words not so long ago. Words are spells. Well, words are spells. So it's I think it's being on a different vibration. It's there are. I think you said when I actually last met you in person, you said what will happen is that people who are on the same vibration will connect with each other. They'll find a way to connect to each other, and we will always think on a sort of like connect on a different level, and transcend words, or transcend the what is being talked about. People what tends to happen is that, again, you've got those people who will always be afraid, because we come back to the thing of that what they don't understand, they will attack. Yeah. So it's this is when you've got to get creative, and this is why they will attack the creatives. But the creatives are ultimately the ones during the lockdown, the creatives were the ones that were able to deal with it. They were the ones that were actually very able to. They can deal with change. They can deal with dramatic change. They can deal with, and they can see through things. So they sort of like I don't know. The way I dealt with it is sometimes if I was told what to do, and I always found it much easier. I don't know, perhaps it's an only child thing, but sort of like I would say, yes, I'll do it. And then I went off and did my own thing. I did an Alice. Anyway,
Brilliant.
unfortunately, I've got to go soon, unfortunately.
It's been absolutely amazing, Sarah. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time. And I mean, I can't remember the last time you came over here, but it was a joy having you here, and it was a joy meeting you in the UK. And you're an amazing soul. And just the fact that you go into schools, you help these kids, you became a yoga teacher, you're writing children's books, you should be so proud of yourself. And long may you continue fighting for the right of, children, and for our free thinking, that I believe is the most dangerous thing for those that want to keep us in the Stone Ages.
I think so. And also, well done, Mark, because I sort of like, I remember the first time I met you, and as I said, you're a very special soul as well, and a very courageous one, and a very generous one. You're a very generous spirit. I just sort of like, just, so it's reciprocated. That respect and love is reciprocated. So thank you very much. God bless you.
And maybe we'll do it again sometime soon, and keep up the great work. And thank you so much. And I'll put all the links to your books, all the links to everything that you're doing. And I'm sure people are going to be very thankful. So take care.
Lovely. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.